Hi, my name is John Hare, and today I want to talk to you about a treatment we've got for C. difficile infection. And for the general population, that's probably over your head, but for anybody that's in healthcare, they certainly know about C. difficile. C. difficile is a bacterial infection, infects probably 500,000 people in North America every year, kills about 30,000 of them. And we've got a treatment that is a non-antibiotic, and it's a bacteria, by the way, C. diff. Typically, you think of antibiotics as the treatment for bacterial infections. In our case, we've actually come up with an oral dose antibody, first in the world, to treat C. difficile infection. We've actually perfected that technology on the animal health side, where we got the first registered veterinary biologic, which is an animal health treatment to treat young animals against E. coli bacterial infections. So anyway, the technology is sound, it works really well. The side effects are virtually zero. So one of the biggest problems with any bacterial infection is that you take an antibiotic and they all have side effects, and it's something to concern yourself with. And in this case, we don't have to worry about that. Plus, we don't have what they call the concern with antimicrobial resistance. In other words, where bacteria will mutate and then not be affected by the antibiotic the way they always had been. And that's going to be a big problem, by the way, going forward. Antimicrobial resistance, they say, is going to probably kill 10 million people a year in the world, just because you get a bacterial infection where there's no antibiotics left to treat them. Anyway, we have a treatment for C. difficile infection. Again, most people in the general population won't know what that is. Hospital, everybody knows what it is. Everybody in healthcare knows what it is. What our strategy is to come up with an actual cure, which we have, and we've done now about 140 patients overall. I would say we're at 94% cure rate, which, by the way, that's far superior to anything else that's out there so far. And in any drug, that's really high standards. So we do have the better mousetrap, no question about it. Biggest problem we've had is trying to finance, the actual clinical trials. The research is done. It's now just, approving to, the FDA that it actually it works. At the safety side, not worried about that in the least, and that, by the way, is another story. Anyway, how do we finance this? And so, the biggest problem, normally what happens is, you've got, in a small biotech company like us, you've got you go through research and you have an idea and you try to develop that into a product, and then you've got, friends, family come in and invest, and you've got then eventually venture capital people will come in and invest. And the whole idea is that you look at that treatment as to where is its exit strategy. In other words, who's going to buy you out once you're approved? And that normally would be big pharma. And so in our case, what we've done is we went up and said, okay, we can do a better job of actually curing C. difficile. Maybe that was a mistake on our part, because now we're going up. The standard of care always is an antibiotic. It only works, as a matter of fact, the two antibiotics that work right now or even approved are vancomycin and fidaxomicin. And fidaxomicin, I think, sells for like $5,600 per treatment, which is a 10 to 15 day treatment, and that's the extent of the valuation of that product. Mind you, there's 500,000 people a year, so if you think that at $5,000 times 500,000 cases a year in the United States alone, that's $2.5 billion. So not a small drug by any means. And so anyway. But because that's there already, and what we did, we said, okay, we can go right up against that treatment because, matter of fact, ours works better from the point of view of long term. One of the biggest problems with C. diff is you get infected and then you get the antibiotic treatment, you get better for a little while. C. diff is a spore-forming bacteria. In other words, you have the bacteria and it also forms these spores. So the antibiotic will knock out the bacteria. The spore can lay dormant and then germinate later on. So after the antibiotic treatment, the patient thinks they're better. 2 weeks later, they're sick again. And that's called recurrent C. diff. And patients can actually recur, several times. Matter of fact, if you've recurred once, your chances of recurring again go up instead of down. So there really isn't, sort of a complete treatment. As a matter of fact, they call C. difficile infection there's a term in the industry that's it's a medical need, because it's an unmet medical need, because we do not have a complete cure for it. So in our case, obviously, a new treatment that's, first of all, non-toxic and does better than the standard of care right now would meet that unmet medical need. And by the way, that causes the FDA typically to work faster as far as getting your drug approved, especially when the safety issue, in our case, is so minimal. Anyway, but where we probably made the mistake was by going up against the bacterial infection with something that was going to go take on the actual antibiotics. Because what happens when a patient presents with C. diff, and before they even test for C. diff, a doctor will question the patient, profuse diarrhea, something they've not seen, they're on the can 20 times a day, and they've just had an antibiotic treatment within the last 2 months. So right away the doctor says, I think you probably have C. diff. They'll actually give that patient the standard of care, which would be the vancomycin or the fidaxomicin antibiotic right away. They do a stool test, and 2 days later it comes back, yes, they're positive for C. diff, and so they just continue the antibiotic treatment. In our case, to be the new guy on the block, they're already started on the antibiotics, so you might as well let them finish. And even on the trial basis, one of the things that precluded us from recruiting trial patients, if they had been on an antibiotic treatment for more than 24 hours, they didn't qualify for our treatment. And the logic there, very obvious, is that how would you know what actually cured them? Was it the 2 or 3 days of antibiotics, or was it our treatment? So anyway, regardless of that, where I say we probably made a mistake is we didn't go on the preventive side. And when you think about who benefits on the preventive side, so we've already said, okay, from the financial side, if you're an investor on a therapeutic, the exit strategy is big pharma buying you out. And I think $2.5 billion is not a bad market, but regardless, typically big pharma doesn't look at drugs that are that limited. In other words, the patient is better within 10 to 15 days. The average drug right now being approved by the FDA is $115,000 per patient per year, and they expect that patient will use that drug for many years going forward. And so, from a business standpoint and a business decision as to what kind of drugs you invest in, if you're big pharma, you invest in the ones that are going to give you the best payback. Not that ours wouldn't give a good payback, but, obviously. So anyway, now, a couple of those companies, big pharma, actually saw a market potential in preventing C. difficile. As a matter of fact, 2 companies, Pfizer and Sanofi Pasteur, both spent a lot of time and money trying to come up with a vaccine that would prevent patients that would be potentially susceptible to C. difficile from getting infected with it. And I'm not a scientist per se, or a researcher necessarily, but C. difficile is a bacterial infection that affects your gut, so it's not systemic. So you're taking a vaccine for C. diff, which is, in other words, you're going to vaccinate the patient, stimulate their immune system to produce antibodies that will circulate in the bloodstream, but C. diff hits you in the gut. So those bloodstream antibodies, I don't know if they're going to do that well. As a matter of fact, what happened, and I don't know that's my layman's explanation as to maybe why it didn't work that well, but both those companies dropped, after many years of trying to get it to work, dropped the idea of a preventive. So obviously they saw the benefit from a financial point of view of doing a preventive. And where I'm saying we probably made a mistake is not going the preventive market to start with, because no question, we can provide a very safe preventive treatment to patients that would be potentially susceptible to C. diff. So in other words, if you've had an antibiotic, a broad-spectrum antibiotic treatment that would make you susceptible, in other words, that broad-spectrum antibiotic knocks out the gut flora that would otherwise protect you from C. diff, we could actually give you an oral dose antibody that sits and you take it every day for a couple, 3 weeks. It's not a big deal to do it. It's very safe. And now if you do come in contact during that period when you're susceptible, the bacteria goes in there, tries to infect you, you've got the antibodies where they need it to be right away, and you don't get infected. So I think that's probably the area we want to go at. And by the way, from the point of view of people that should be investing in that now, maybe the investors will look at that, okay, that's a better opportunity for us, because obviously Pfizer and Sanofi Pasteur looked at the preventive market, so obviously they saw the valuation there. So now the investors maybe could look at us, more favorably in that regard. But now the other side is, who else benefits from a preventive? Well, okay, you think in healthcare, if a patient comes into your hospital, and I'm now addressing the hospitals themselves, comes into your hospital for knee surgery or whatever, he's going to get a knee replacement, and then during that period of time, the hospital administers an antibiotic to 50% of their patients anyway, and so now they administer that antibiotic. The patients now, because of that antibiotic, knocks out the gut flora that would otherwise protect them from C. diff. That patient is susceptible to C. diff, if he comes in contact, which by the way, the hospital is a famous place for getting C. diff, they're now sick with C. diff. Now, that patient that came in for knee surgery, sure, the knee surgery may have been fine, but that the patient's now got C. difficile, which basically was acquired in the hospital. Typically, they say it costs about $25,000 extra to treat that patient. You know, he came in for knee surgery, could have been out the next day. Now he's got to be sitting there, you know, trying to get rid of his C. difficile. And, you know, it's quarantine, it's a very contagious infection. Obviously, there's a lot of other people in the hospital that are also susceptible to C. diff. Now, the nurses going in and out of the room have to gown up, you know, gown down when they come out. You know, it's a high biosecurity situation, so very expensive for the hospital. So there's another group that should be able to look at what we're doing and say, it may not make us money, but it can certainly save us money. And even the nurses from that perspective, I mean, if we could figure out a way to crowdfund this thing, there's 3.4 million registered nurses in the United States, and they all know about C. difficile, I guarantee you. It would make their job a whole lot easier if they didn't have to deal with C. diff patients, because one of the problems with C. diff, it's profuse diarrhea. That's the main problem, other than the fact that the patient itself is really sick because of it and potentially could die from it. But somebody has to clean up the mess, unfortunately, and that's a terrible thing, but that's what it is. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to say, let's work on the preventive side, and we're looking for investors to figure out how to come on board with us. My name is John here. You can reach me at 941-221-2505, and we've got where you can reach me from emails that I'll put up on this video. Anyway, John here signing off, and hopefully this has resonated with a few of you that might think, okay, all of a sudden there's a better reason for getting involved with a better mousetrap for C. difficile infection. Thanks for listening.